First thing that I want to do is I want to give our panelists, now that Alicia is here with us, the opportunity to kind of reintroduce themselves, talk about your work and kind of your initial reactions to the film, and then we'll go into some guided discussion questions, and then open it up for Q&A in the audience. Sound good? So Talia, you want to start?
So my name is Talia Anguiano. I'm a second-year graduate student here at Kent State University, graduating in 22 days. Not counting or anything, but very excited. I went to Drake University in Des Moines, Iowa for my undergrad, where I studied law and public relations, and I had the really cool opportunity of being immersed in the 2016 presidential elections for the Iowa caucuses there. So being Latino myself, I got to engage in a lot of Latino community organizing and civic engagement work during the presidential election, which was a really neat experience. So yeah, I'm excited to be here. I really enjoyed the film. It was my first time watching it. There's not a lot of Latinx representation in politics, so for me to see someone who looks like me and someone who has the same identities as me in a role like that, it's empowering. So I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
Hi everybody, my name is Alicia Robinson. I'm the Assistant Director at the Women's Center. Wait, I'm saying everything. Yeah. Okay, I'm the Assistant Director at the Women's Center. I also have a nonprofit organization on the side, so I have a teen enrichment program that we do in inner city schools. I'm also very active in the community, so I worked on one campaign. It was for a judge. Her name was Allison Rowe, and she won, so I feel like, I got that in myself. I'm also part of the Summit County Young Democrats, where I'm just a normal member, so I'm not a board or anything. My best friend is the president, so I feel like I hear a lot of things. I really enjoy, well, a little bit about the Women's Center. We do women's leadership and civic engagement initiatives on campus. So we have a leadership program. We do a lot of workshops around feminism and activism and different things like that. So trying to really support our students as they, step into the true activists that they are. I really enjoyed the film. Like, there were so many layers for me. Just seeing her as a Latina woman, maneuvering through a working, class woman, that was very amazing to me. And even the relationship dynamics, I could do like a whole relationship panel just off of the documentary itself. I ain't no good for you. And then in the end, she realized that. It was really good, very empowering, just very inspirational.
My name is Shannon Garrett. I am a political consultant. I have a political consulting firm called S&T Strategies. And I'm also the co-founder and on the board of a national organization called Vote, Run, Lead that trains barrier-breaking women to run for office and win. In a quick little plug there, we've got a training coming up on May 18th down in Columbus. Actually 20 cities on the same day, but down in Columbus we're training women to run for office. So if any of you are interested, hit up Vote, Run, Lead that word. But politics is nothing but shameless plug.
And I went through that program a couple years ago at the Galvanize conference. So I was program. So you guys should definitely do it.
That's fantastic. And I got the opportunity to watch the movie last night, and again, I cried a little bit today because I'm a sucker for any election night. But I do, a lot of what we talk about at Vote, Run, Lead is how to help women run as you are. That it's important that you maintain who it is that you are when you're running for office, and that you don't try to change just to try to get elected. And I think this film is perfectly captures that there's nothing about your story that's not important, that sharing your story is what can help you win and be effective.
That's a great point. So I guess I'll start with my first guide question, which is totally related to what you just said, Shannon, which is I want to ask, what are the specific challenges for getting visibility for candidates representing marginalized populations or already underrepresented populations, right? So you run as you are, right? There are particular challenges for certain candidates or others, and you want to speak to that a little bit more?
For sure. And it's hard because we live in an environment now where everybody talks about identity politics. We shouldn't worry about identity politics, or we should. The fact is, you are who you are. There is no running from being female, running from being a woman of color. There's no, it is who you are. And so the way that you overcome that we talk about a lot, both in Vote, Run, Lead and in the one-on-one work I do, is that you just embrace your story. Your story is your leadership, it's your experience, and it's your expertise. And the more that you can share your story of living or working or raising a family and community, the more that we can sort of bridge some of those identity politics issues by showing that we have things in common. And when it comes down to it with voters, it's really about who do I trust to make decisions for me. So the more that you can share your experience and your stories, the more that that other stuff can follow it. That's not to say that it doesn't still happen. Like, I don't want a rose color
Right.
running for office for sure, but that's one of the ways that we would.
And so, Talia, you said that you have some experience in political organizing for campaigns, so maybe you want to speak to a little bit about your experience with that in terms of working as like a political activist, right, in the Latinx community, but also in increasing visibility for fellow Latinx organizers, candidates. So what can we do, like, outside of the community to kind of promote that, facilitate that, and that was.
Yeah, sure, definitely. So in Des Moines, like, if you ever get a chance to be in Iowa and Des Moines for the caucuses, I highly recommend it. Everything is just, like, absolutely crazy. I think you, like, yesterday, students at Drake University got to meet, like, 3 presidential candidates in, like, 2 hours, which was really cool. So being able to work on just, like, overall engaging the Latinx community in Des Moines was really interesting for me. A couple of barriers that were kind of common themes in the different groups I got to work with is language barriers, which Carmen mentioned super early in the film. These barriers of, you know, the Latinx community isn't really as engaged as we would like them to be in overall politics. There seems to be this, like, gap between this community and politicians in general, and this lack of trust between both groups. So trying to get people to learn more about the political process and being willing to learn about the process was really, it was challenging. And I think by the end of the caucuses, we had seen an increase in the Latinx community participating in the 2016 caucuses, which is cool. So we're definitely, I think, even with the 2016 presidential election, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a spike in, like, Latinx voter turnout rates, which was really cool. So I think we're starting to see more of an increase and more of a wave there, but there's definitely still a lot of barriers and challenges that come with that as well. There was a second part to the question. I feel like I didn't answer. Maybe I did.
I think you did, yeah. Perfect. Okay, so Alicia, maybe you want to talk to, on a similar note, about your work with feminist activism and kind of that process as well.
The Women's Center?
Yeah.
So at the Women's Center, over the last couple of years, we've kind of broadened our scope and what we've done, especially focusing on areas where women are predominantly underrepresented. So we rolled out a few different initiatives, particularly for women in politics. So this past year, we had a Women's Friday that was all around women in politics. So we had State Representative Emily Sykes here, we had Judge Alice Monroe, we had an auditor from Portage County, we had the lovely Dr. Ashley Nichols on the panel as well. So it was just really beautiful. And it was a nonpartisan discussion just about women running for office and how we can better prepare, you know, ourselves to run for office and some of the challenges we may, you know, have to maneuver. So I think that that was really good. And we also had, we brought a lectern here in February. It was awesome. We actually were in this very room, which is very liberating, you know, make forward. So we're in this very room, and kind of that program teaches students how to run for undergraduate government. But what you learn and the skills that you gain, you can also use them to actually run for office. And we had State Representative Stephanie Hauser, who was our keynote speaker. We had a few representatives from USG here as well. It was a very empowering day, so just really giving students the tools they need to kind of go forward in their journey into activism. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, so perfect. Thank you for that. All right, so Talia, my next question for you is, kind of seeing this development in your work, right? So what kind of gives you hope for greater roles for women in civic and political engagement, right?
The idea of representation is really important to me, so I look at Carmen and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, if you don't follow her, highly recommend it. I'm convinced she's my cousin in some way, shape, or form. And if she's not, then I'll work to make that happen. But she's just we're seeing so many women of color generally, specifically Latino women running for office just all across the country. So for me as a Latino woman, and for me as someone who is interested in serving in an elected role in some way, shape, or form later down in my career, it's really cool to be able to have people who I'm able to resonate with in different lives. We have different life stories, but there's different parts of those life stories that I can resonate with, which is really cool. So it kind of shows me that, you know, coming from like a working class family and whatnot, like they're able to do it, so I can as well. So yeah, it was a good bill, so.
Absolutely, I love that. So sticking with the theme of hope, right, because for me that was the main takeaway from the film, and there are a lot of themes that we see appear in that film, like, over time. But Shannon, my question for you is, have you seen like positive changes in how candidates from underrepresented or marginalized populations are received or perceived in their communities of running? And so kind of,
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, we were seeing it all along, but definitely the last presidential election changed some things in a number of ways that we could talk about offline. But it is definitely, there is more openness, I think, now to change in leadership. I think people are starting to wake up and recognize where power resides in their communities. So we obviously have in, the congressional level, the federal level, with a lot of changes that's very visible that we can see and point to. But in every community around the country, there are changes like that happening, and we're still at a point in this country where we have to have a first elected. There has to be a first woman, a first person of color, a first woman of color. And until we get over that, until we make it normal for all residents in our community to feel comfortable running for office, and winning is not going to change. And I think that when we see what happened at the federal level, and now we're starting to see it happen more and more because more women are seeing people who look like them on CNN or on Fox News or on MSNBC, and it gives you something to say, I can do it. Like, I can make that happen. And I think too, going back to the film, that really when it comes to local politics, it usually is a local backyard issue. That's what sparks somebody to get involved in the first place. And so as you all go off into your careers and you're working and living and raising families or doing what you do, pay attention to what's happening in your own backyard and think about, is there a place for me to be running for office alongside the work that I'm doing? Because when you see city councils, township boards, county commissions, school boards, all of those folks have day jobs or night jobs. So think about, is there a place for this along my career and what I'm planning to do? Is there some way that I can create change?
Great, I love that. So speaking of power and kind of finding your place, Alicia, I know a lot of your work is about equity for female identifying faculty and students here on campus, and maybe you can talk about how kind of that story politically translates to work here on campus and those same changes in power dynamics.
I think first and foremost, we talk a lot about just like the confidence gap and just believing that you can do it. And so a lot of times, you sit in something, you attend something, and you leave feeling with that little pit in your gut, like, that wasn't right. Like, somebody needs to say something. And a lot of times we're trying to encourage our students to realize, like, that somebody is you. That's why you feel so strongly about that. You have the power, it's in you, and you can make change, you make systematic change, and that type of thing. So we see that resonate in our work a lot. A lot of times, too, I believe it's about being strategic. So I remember right when we had the first Women's March, I had some interns come up to me like, Alicia, I may have to call you later because you might have to bail me out of jail. And I was like, well, first of all, I don't have any money to bail you out. Please don't call me because I don't have it. Second of all, I'm like, if you're in jail, instead of you, having to be bailed out of jail, we kind of need you to graduate so that you can go get a job, so that you can change some of these policies. So we won't have to have so many marches. So I think it's very important to see, sometimes you have to climb the ladder to change the ladder. But we do need people walking and marching, and, we need all of that at all the different levels of activism, but it's important to see that we all have our role that we can play and that we will play, and it really can create change. So I think that's really important.
So related to Talia, do you want to talk about and that idea of having the power to say something to encourage students, right? So you're a grad student in higher education, so I think that's totally related. So you want to speak to that a little bit?
Sure, definitely. I think generally in higher ed students, we oftentimes the students forget that we have a lot of power, we have a lot of voice in what we say. If you think about it, a lot of institutional changes that come from the top down is sparked from a lot of movements that happen on our campuses that come from students. So as a graduate student, as someone who's getting ready to transition into an entry-level professional role on a college campus, I want to remind you all that, you're all students, yes, don't get yourselves in jail, don't ask people to bail you out or anything like that, but go out and if you see something that's not right or if you see something that you want to change or anything like that, find your people on campus, build your community, build your group on campus. Identify those higher ed professionals on the college campus who are able to kind of support you as best as they are able to within their own jurisdictions and roles. And go out and create those changes that we know that you all can, and we know that we've seen traditionally in higher ed over, a couple of years now, so.
Jan, do you think you want to add to the discussion of Power finding voice?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I think, it really is about taking that first step and seeing that one thing. And I think one piece of advice I always give to my teachers when they start this stuff is, when I first moved to Washington, D.C., I was working for a think tank, and I would go to these coalition meetings all the time, and I would sit in the room, and I would have an idea that I wanted to lend to this policy that we were talking about, but I wouldn't say it. And then 10 minutes later, some guy would say it, and it would be like, oh, that's almost what I was going to say, except for mine was better. And so I had to actually consciously think to myself, I am going to speak within the first 5 minutes of any coalition meeting I go to. And I don't care what it is, even if it's to ask where the coffee is or something, but I'm going to use my voice. And in that way, help me be able to use it at the times that really matter. So I think the more that we can think consciously ourselves about how am I injecting myself in here, the more you're going to find your own power.
I want to add a little bit to what you said too. So you'll see in higher education, well, I guess I know this part of higher ed, but the higher you go, the more university level committees you're on. So I'm on a lot of university level committees around climate, around campus policy, and different things like that. So when students come to me and complain about something on campus, I look at them and I say, email, dear students. Email, when you send those emails, especially if you send more than one, of course you need to be polite and respectful. You should get an email with, hi, comma, my name is, because I've gotten emails where it's just like a text message. Please don't, okay, sorry. Let me stay on point. So send an email, and they really do read them. Like, we really do listen to our students here at Kent State University. I think it's a beautiful thing. If you send enough emails, you get enough people together to kind of push forward that change, it really will happen. A lot of meetings when we talk about it. So,
Okay, so that's great. I think it's a great time to ask then, what strategies do you utilize on campus and on campus that we can translate to a neighborhood or community organization?
I think it's really, really important. Actually, just did a presentation on this at a conference. Relationship building is number one. So I think it's very important to, write down the goal that you're trying to achieve, write down the action steps and the plans for it. So set a deadline, make a SMART goal, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And then look at who are your stakeholders that you need to push it forward. Once you identify them, I think relationship building is key. And make sure you're always evolving your relationships as you're building them, because nobody wants anybody always coming to them when they just want something. Make sure you're building those relationships, developing those connections, knowing your direction, knowing your goal, and then also self-care. I think a lot of times as activists and as people who want to protect their voice and who want to make change, we forget to really take care of ourselves. To really have that rest day. Watch Netflix. It's okay.
Absolutely. That's a great point. All right, Shannon, do you want to address the second half of that question? Things that we can learn from the film that we can take away to use as future activists or current activists?
I think everything you just said is right. That's basically a campaign plan. And part of what we talk about with the Run As You Are work that we do with Go Run Lead is about that sort of, if we actually have something that's the 90-day challenge, so 30 things that you can do over 90 days to get yourself ready to run for office. But it's all based around relationship building. So thinking, even if you don't know that you're going to run for office, just thinking that one day you might, and sort of keeping that, I don't know if you all know what Rolodex is still. Keeping that Rolodex in your head of the people that you've met along the way, because there will be people that you're meeting here on campus. There'll be people that you're meeting in the community that you might not know how they're going to factor into your life in the future. And so being able to build those relationships, even if they're not, checking in with somebody every month or something like that, but keeping that mental list of who you know and what you can invite them to and how you can get them involved. Because it's years from now, they might turn out to be your biggest supporters when you run, or they might go on to be in an office and you need their help making change.
I echo everything that Alicia and Shannon said. Yeah, I'm just gonna leave it there because I'll just ramble and do the same things that
I do want to add something too, a little bit. I think branding is very important. I think a lot of times as students feel like, oh, I'm in undergrad, I'm in Like, your brand is very important now. So I think that that's very important. I wish somebody would have told me that back in the day when I'm posting the types of pictures on Facebook. Spring break. You know, so branding is very important, especially if you want to like be a political figure. I was talking with some of my colleagues the other day about how social media is going to really like demolish some future candidates' campaigns go forward. If I can go back to your tweets from 2006, pull out something that you were saying, am I still going to vote for you? So I feel like now, this day and age, like social media is so prevalent. Even in like Michelle Obama's book, she talked about when Barack Obama first ran and how like social media and like the millennials is kind of why he won, because social media was just booming. And now it's here and it's a whole entity, and I think that we should all think about that. We're gonna post something on Snapchat that erases. I just heard the other day that it really doesn't erase it. Snapchat owns it. What are we gonna do? So I just branding is everything. Okay. I just down the coffee.
So Shannon, as a campaign strategist, want to speak to the role of social media and how it can be used as a tool, either positive or
Yeah, don't post it. No, social media can be great, but it's all factored into the campaign and the audience that you're trying to reach. And so, depending on what office you're running for, you'll use social media in a different way. So clearly, if you're running, needing people all over the United States to vote for you, social media is going to come in really handy. If you're running for a super local office where it's a targeted group of, in some cases, only a couple hundred people that you're trying to reach, social media could cause more problems than it's worth. And so it's all about figuring out how to factor that into the actual campaign itself. But in terms of not knowing whether or not you're going to run for office, it's whether you're going to run for office or you're going to try to seek a higher job, or only people are looking at social media. So keeping that in the back of your mind when you're posting things is important. But yeah, social media is becoming key. It's also another way for people to reach you. And that's important.
So I said that for me, the primary theme from the film that I got was like hope for change, hope for hope, right? So maybe if you could just go to one time, Latoya, and talk about, what your key takeaway is, or what you perceive to be the primary theme of the story, Carmen's story, and kind of how we can use that to grow democracy. Right?
Sure. So the key theme for me was empowerment. And I think Carmen did a really nice job of reiterating this, and I just watched the video from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She was speaking at some event, like, there is nothing wrong with being a working class citizen in the United States and going and pursuing an elected role in a public office. So for me, I think that was good for me to see, and I think we need to see more people like Carmen and more people like Alexandria in these roles. To show, there's actually like diversity within like the people that serve in these public offices. So.
Do you see yourself running for public office then?
Yeah, I do at some point. I'm trying to get a job first. So, so after that, yeah, I'm really passionate about equitable public education. So I see myself going back home and serving on the Board of Education someday. So we'll see.
Beautiful. I love it.
To go along with empowerment, I would say work ethic and endurance and resiliency. I think that just seeing her kind of pick up, decide to run, and then still like, yeah, I'm still cleaning the rooms at the hotel. Like, I'm not above this, I'm not too good for this. I need to make money, I need to balance, my priorities. So I really just enjoy seeing her work ethic, how she kept pushing, and even when she had personal issues going on, she still kept her eye on the goal and her eye on the prize. Really kind of following her purpose and what she really wanted to do. So I think that was very empowering for me to see that, and to also just take note of her work ethic and just how many hours she put in. She could have put in some self-care days, but it's okay, but her work ethic was really, really good.
I would say it just reinforces the concept that democracy belongs to all of us, and it's up to us to get involved. So we have for so long just let other people run. And I joke about the reason why we're in this political climate that we're in right now. People blame it on campaign finance, they blame it on social media or cable news. But the problem is that we've had, since the dawn of our democracy, the exact same government. All people who look the same, walked similar life experiences. And that's not to say that the white guys in the room shouldn't run for office, I'm not saying that. But when you have a group of people who've had the power for so long, that it becomes less about what are we doing in policy and more about keeping that power. So then you've got the Republicans trying to get more power, and the Democrats trying, and it goes back and forth. But when you start injecting different voices into that, different life experiences, people who are living under these policies in different ways, you come up with better solutions. There's all sorts of research out there that shows diverse groups of people come to better solutions than people who've all had similar experience. The problem is, for A, that we weren't allowed to be a part of that process for so long, and the engagement of diverse groups has been different throughout our history, and when we've been allowed to participate. But now we are at a point in time where we all are able to participate in our democracy. It's up to us to take that power and to do with it what we think will improve our communities. So that's my takeaway, is democracy belongs to us, but we need to engage.
I love that. Perfect. So I think now is a good time to open it up to you all for questions of our panelists. So, keeping with the democratic principles that we're trying to promote here, any questions?
Okay, I hope I worded this right because it might come off as vague. But I said, if you are someone who's not used to being in the spotlight yet you want to be in a position to create change, what are some ways you can find your identity that resonates
So I think we all have to make that question. So,
I always tell people, sometimes people will be like, oh, well, I'm used to being in the background, or oh, I don't like to speak in front of people, or oh, I would say, put yourself in the spotlight and put yourself out there and start speaking. Because there's no better way to learn than to just start like doing it. So I would definitely say, find different areas and opportunities to be a leader, especially if you're trying to run for, office, like community, get engaged in the community. So find your local, whether it's Young Dems or Young Republicans or, whatever you're into, start going to that and then develop a leadership role. Because then you start to build your network and connect.
I agree 100% with Alicia. I think something that also comes to mind is going back to that relationship building and community piece. Being able to really use your networks of people to get the word out and get the message spread out in the community that you're trying to advocate for. So definitely using those people that are in your circle to really, spread your message.
Yeah, and it just goes back to just doing it, but also sort of that shine theory that more people are talking about now when you're going out with your squad and talking to people. Try to find other people that you could, not necessarily who would be mentors, but would be more like sponsors for you, that will help raise your visibility, even if you're not there yet. So who's somebody that would invite you to the next, fundraiser soiree for the Congresswoman or something like that. And then at the same time, do that for your friends. And the more that you can all start introducing each other in ways that are lifting each other up and putting them in the spotlight, the more you're going to get used to it yourself.
Did I answer, or did you say something about identity too?
Yeah, it was kind of more about identity because I think when we're talking about like representation, a lot of people don't really know where to like start. Like running for an office position or how they can create change. So I think like a struggle a lot of people have is like how do I identify myself so people like know who I are and know what my message is. So that way I can get into those positions and create like the change that I want to make.
So I would always say, I'm on the road learning to road early. To start with your why. Start with your why. So what is it inside of you that's making you passionate about running for office? 9 times out of 10, it has something to do with like a struggle that you overcame. So I'm very passionate about providing access for women of color, especially in educational settings. Why? Because I'm a woman of color, I'm a first generation college student. I'm the first one in my family to get all of my degrees. So I'm very passionate about that because I hold those identities in that why. So I think a lot of times it's kind of drilling down to see like what is encouraging you to kind of go out there and like, do all these things and run for office. It takes a lot of energy, so there has to be something fueling that fire. So I would really like drill down to that, and once you have your why, your story kind of evolves from that.
Yeah, no, that's the whole curriculum. Does that answer it?
Yeah, no, that answers it pretty well.
Some journaling time.
Yeah.
And then also those who know you too, once you find your why, once you start developing, your pitch and who you are, go to your mentors and go to your sponsors and they can help you, coach you even more as you're like evolving with your campaign message.
I just think for like the represented communities, it's kind of hard to get their start doing something that, you know, we've never really had like
Right.
in the area. So some of them it's hard to identify with the decision change. We haven't really had any representation.
Yeah.
That's just
And I think that that's another way that we can be good allies too, is inviting people into the spaces where that power is. So a lot of times, like the political parties will be the ones who are deciding who's going to run next. So we saw in a video when the city council member died, it was her union organizing work. They were looking for who the next city council member was going to be. But at the same time that was happening, the city council members were probably looking around their rooms going, who are we going to pick to be that person?
Yeah.
And so the more that we can be inviting people in, as we get access to spaces, invite more people into those spaces. Because when they're looking around the room for who to appoint or who to choose to run for office, if we're not there, if they don't see us, then we can't get part of it.
That's like important to be engaged to in your community. She made a really good point, like he just pops up every 4 years. You don't want to be that person. Being really engaged and really being there year in and year out is also very important.
So speaking to the whole idea of being an ally, at our previous event, we had Dr. Brady Blessick come speak, and she said something along the lines of, it's our job as allies to carve a lane for others and then like get out of the way. I guess I think that's part of it too, is helping others to create spaces and not to take up all of that space ourselves, right? Okay. Any other?
There's a question.
Yep. Uh-huh.
Which one?
Whatever.
Okay, so I know you mentioned like how democracy is there, so now we just need to kind of take it. What are some ways that you think you've seen progress, or maybe some ideas or ways that need more progress so that people who are like very low, marginalized can actually have access to those spaces? So like somebody who has to work multiple jobs to feed their family, or somebody who doesn't speak the language in their local area, or those sorts of issues. What do you see could like that? Those are still barriers there. So how are you seeing that field change? And obviously there needs to be more. So what do you think might help with that?
Yeah, I've definitely seen that change quite a bit over the last few years. In terms of, again, when you bring diverse groups of people, they come up with better solutions. So the more that we had women showing up to different organizing meetings and things like that, now all of a sudden you see childcare as almost an expectation at some of these events. Or that if you're going to bring a group of people together and ask them to do volunteering, you should probably feed them because they're giving up something else. And so there's different creative ways I think that groups of people are coming together and creating opportunity in space for people to participate who wouldn't otherwise be able to around things like childcare, transportation. Anytime we do trainings for Vote Our League, we offer scholarships and stipends to cover childcare and transportation to help people be able to get to those spaces. And I also think that using technology in new and different ways for organizing, you know, there's never a time that you can't have a meeting with people all over the country, thanks to the different technologies that are out there. And the fact that I just call them technologies doesn't know what they are. But, you know, using GoToMeeting and Google Hangout and different things like that, using different programs like Asana and project management things so that people can participate at any time that makes sense for them. So you can still be a part of something if you work a third shift job, but you can't come to the meeting at that time. So I think we just need, when we, the people are at the table, we need to think creatively about who's not at this table, why are they not at this table, or what can we do to remove that barrier?
No, I think I agree with all of that, and then also adding on, which I feel like we said too, like, but also meeting people where they are. So one time I was meeting with our vice president, she was like, yeah, I have a meeting at 9 p.m. tonight. And I was like, why? She was like, oh, well, that's where, you know, the shift of like underclassified staff or classified staff, the opposite of what, like that's when they get off work. So kind of like going to where people are and meeting them where they're at. And I also think too, just kind of doing things that like promote like a climate change and a shift of the way of thinking. So I'm very involved in the city of Akron, and they're doing a lot of things around diversity and inclusion efforts. They're doing a lot of trainings with top CEOs and top professionals to kind of train them on how to be a good ally, how to be a good advocate, how they can look around their boardroom and see who's missing. So I think it's also educating the people who are already in power of how they can also open up lanes for people, you know, for people to come in as well. So I think that that's very important and a very good thing.
I can add onto everything that's already been said. I think oftentimes in traditionally marginalized communities, to be able to get access, there's not a lot of education or there's a lack of awareness on how to actually get into these spaces. So for me, I think a strategy is to be very intentional of who you decide to invite into like your direct space. People with different backgrounds, different perspectives, people with different areas of knowledge that can ultimately help open up that lane for you to get into the larger space. So, yeah.
And just real quick, if I can add on. So in most cases, the actual time of a meeting of a city council or a township board or something is not set in a charter. So that's up to the council members themselves to decide when those meetings are. So the more that we could encourage them to hold their meetings at different times. So there's some county commissions that might hold their meetings at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Thursday. Some that do them at 7 o'clock at night. And so if there was a groundswell of people saying, we can't participate because you're holding your meeting at this whack time, that none of us could attend, that would make a difference too. And the other piece, just to inject in there, is that every level of government, especially cities and counties, have boards and commissions, which are groups of residents who advise them on specific issues. And you don't run for those, you get appointed to those. And those are another way for people to get involved and to start building your political reputation and understanding how things work from the inside. Even if you're not ready to get appointed yet, you can find one of those boards and start going and bringing other people along.
All right, another question?
So what if you don't want to run for whatever reason, but you want to change in a way? Like, so I just moved to Akron, which is fantastic, but I can't stand my councilman and his basis of running for things. When you have an election coming up, and the other person running, I don't agree with their policies whatsoever. And I don't know what to do, because I don't want someone who doesn't actually care about the issues, but I don't want someone I disagree with on the issues. So like, where do you go when you something?
Then you're not gonna run for that thing?
I haven't lived at them long enough, and I wouldn't win because of my experience.
Yeah. What ward?
10?
Ward 10. I just met the girl running for Ward 10. That's like
Sharon?
Sharon Heights, right?
Yeah.
No, her name was
Sharon.
She a black lady?
I don't know.
Oh, no. We'll talk about mine.
There was someone running, like, her name was like Sharon Connor.
No, there's a girl who just announced her name is Amy Collins. She's kind of amazing. Okay. She went on fundraiser the other day. We're talking about the same ward. You mean about Get Your Heights?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we'll talk. But I would say, you need to run. Like, you need to run eventually.
Yeah, eventually.
But before that, I'm very involved in, because especially after watching that, I'm like, I probably never will be a councilman. But I do also aspire to be on the Board of Education one day. That's like my over 40 goal. We'll wait a little bit longer. Don't know. But I think that there's always a lot of things that you can do around your community. So I always focus my efforts on what can I do in my sphere of influence. So finding those little passion projects that can help make people's lives better around you. So even if it's just like a drive for your local shelter, or even just the things that you feel really passionate about, I guarantee that there's things that you can do. I mean, I jumped, and started a whole nonprofit. You don't have to go that big if you don't want to, but there's always little initiatives that you can do. Or especially in Akron, there's so many beautiful projects going on that you can kind of pour your passion into to help, better the community while you're getting your campaign together to try and
And get appointed to one of those boards or commissions.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can do that now, there's usually not a residency. The residency requirement is usually just that you live in the city limits, not that you've been there for a certain amount of time. So if there's a particular issue or problem that you want to change, see if there's a board or commission that's working on it and advising city council and apply. Frankly, we've had, much like all the rest of our local governments, the same people sitting there forever, and they're practically looking for younger people to be part of it.
Thanks.